Welcome to your Chapter 1 podcast. We are going over environmental science. We're going to talk about what environmental science is. We're also going to talk about what some of the major themes of environmental science are as well. All right, we're going to start by identifying what is environmental. All right, a couple key ideas in environmental science, as we said before. Let's go over some major themes in environmental science. Another major theme in environmental science is human population and well-being. So we have seen a pretty steady rise in our population over the history of humans, and the human population is still growing, but we're seeing that rates are starting to level off. They're starting to stabilize. We're looking at having a human population of about 8 to 10 billion by 2050. While this is staggering, stabilization is good, slowing of the human population is good. This is a sign of progress. Pollution is decreased, and therefore having also a cleaner environment as well as better health care. We're seeing a decrease in infant mortality, so women are having less children than they did before, and those children are surviving to adulthood. We're also seeing, as I said, better health care. The incidence of life-threatening infectious diseases like smallpox and polio have been reduced sharply in countries that are using the vaccinations. Life expectancies, because that, have nearly doubled. And we're also seeing more social stability. Families are having fewer children, but those children are healthier and they're surviving. Tagging on to the human population and well-being, continuing on that thought, hunger and food resources are distributed pretty unevenly. We see in industrialized countries an overproduction of food and a lot of food going to waste, and then we see in other countries there is not enough production of food and people are starving. However, we do have some signs of progress. Global food production has increased faster than human population growth, which is great because we have an increase in the human population. We need to be able to feed all these people. But the distribution of that food still remains a problem. So how do we get food to people in countries who don't have an overabundance of food? And how do we increase agricultural output in other countries that are struggling still? And a lot of that comes with better technology. Better agricultural practices. So education is a key in that. As we touched on the last slide, still talking about human population and well-being, we see an increase in information and education, and a lot of this is due to the fact that we now suddenly have the internet as a means to communicate globally, and a lot more people have access to the information that's provided on the internet. So many environmental issues can be fixed by new ideas, technologies, and strategies, and those usually get shared in electronic format through the internet. Signs of progress. So we know this is happening. We see literacy and access to education expanding in most regions of the world. All children are slowly starting to get access to education. The internet is making it easier to share environmental solutions amongst people all over the world. And expanding education for girls has been one of the most significant impacts on the human population, because now that women have access to education, they're also better able to make decisions regarding their reproductive health. And as a result of that, we're seeing declining birth rates worldwide. Our next theme of environmental science is natural resources. One of the biggest issues concerning natural resources is biodiversity loss, and this is caused by habitat destruction, overexploitation, pollution, as well as the introduction of exotic species. So let's talk first about habitat destruction. At least half the forests existing before the introduction of agriculture have been cleared. Many of the ancient forests that harbor some of the greatest biodiversity, and when I say biodiversity, I mean a large difference in the type of species you have living in one particular area. These have been cleared, and they're rapidly being cut for not only timber, but also oil extraction to get into those oil pockets. And they're also being used for agricultural production and traded commodities. So we're losing habitat. when we take resources from an environment, sometimes as humans we tend to overdo it and we take too much, and that's overexploitation. We're seeing pollution invading that, and of course that's killing off a lot of our diverse species. And the introduction of exotic species here in Colorado, I know zebra mussels are an exotic species that they are trying to keep out of lakes. Those can really take over and degrade the quality of life in a lake or a pond for the native organisms that are there. Continuing on with natural resources, let's talk about the conservation of forests and the creation of nature preserves. Deforestation has contributed to the loss of habitat. Thankfully, though, countries are starting to find value in creating nature preserves, or these untouched pieces of land, and declining, slowing, or stopping the rate of deforestation. For example, Asia and Brazil has slowed their rate of deforestation. We're seeing about 13.5% of the world's land area is now in a protected area, which is really vital for keeping our biodiversity loss at a minimum. All right, another natural resource that we have to take into consideration are our marine resources. About 1 billion people in developing countries do depend on the ocean and seafood as their main source of animal protein, but we see that a lot of commercial fisheries around the world are in steep decline. About 3/4 of the fish stocks are being severely depleted. They're in urgent need of better management. So what countries are starting to do is they're starting to create these marine protected areas, and they're better monitoring those fish populations or the stocks of fish, which gives us better management of the fish supply and also makes that fish supply more sustainable for the future. All right, our last natural resource to talk about under our major themes of environmental science is energy resources. And we'll be talking about this a lot later on this semester. We have a whole chapter on energy. But we know that our non-renewable energy sources, such as oil, are in decline. So it is non-renewable. We can't get them back. We can't produce any more of them. And we're seeing that those non-renewable sources need to be replaced with renewable sources of energy. It used to be that using solar power or any of those other renewable sources of energy were very expensive in their setup fees, and now we're starting to see that the cost, for example, of solar is decreasing rapidly. So more people can access renewable energy sources to transition away from non-renewable energy sources.